We are now taking you live to Daniel Andrews.
Late last night, and I've got some meetings I've got to get to later on today. But I'll make some comments, and the Treasurer will make some comments, and then we're happy to take some questions. First off, I just want to thank Commonwealth Games authorities for the good nature, the good faith, the nature of these negotiations. They were negotiations in good faith, and I fully appreciate that. They really have one role, and that is to put on a Commonwealth Games every 4 years, and for unavoidable and for the best of reasons, it's simply not possible for us to be able to host these games in 2026, not without incurring enormous costs that far outweigh the benefits of these games. So I do genuinely thank them, and I acknowledge that this has been a very challenging time for them, very disappointing for them as well as athletes and many other people. But the fact that they were able to engage in good faith in these important negotiations and get a settlement is a good outcome for everybody involved. They can now focus on finding a host for 2026 and making arrangements beyond, and we can focus on delivering thousands of houses and other sporting infrastructure right across regional Victoria. Terms of these settlement are legally binding, and I am limited in what I can say. For instance, I'm not in a position to be able to talk to you about all the cut and thrust, offers and counter offers, all of those issues, but I can confirm a final settlement, $380 million, not a dollar more, no court action. The matter is closed out and finalised, and I want to thank our legal teams as well as those who provided us with commercial advice. And the advice I have is that in terms of industry standards and the nature of contract break clauses, this is the best outcome that Victoria could get in those commercial terms. So this brings to an end this matter. There can be no further appeals, there can be no further action, and that is a good thing. As I said, that means the Commonwealth Games authorities can focus on finding a host venue for 26 and beyond, and we can focus on getting thousands of houses built for regional Victorians, together with sporting infrastructure, tourism, major events infrastructure, all of that work that we've already announced, that comprehensive $2 billion package. With this final settlement, that means that these matters are closed, and they are all closed out, the regional package and this settlement, within the original budget. No further monies will need to come from any other part of government in order to support this matter being finalised and closed out. Just before I hand to the Treasurer, I just want to give you a sense of what the three options here were. We could sort of push on, and we could deliver these games at a cost of between $6 and $7 billion, and potentially even more than that. That would mean that the costs far outweighed the benefits, and that would not be the responsible thing to do. That would not be the right thing to do. The second option is to, if you like, fight this and say, well, no, we're not going to pay a break fee. And all that would mean is that we would be off in the Court of Arbitration for Sport on the other side of the world, and possibly multiple courts on the other side of the world, and indeed some courts here. Supreme Court, High Court. It would be a lawyer's picnic. It would drag on for years. And who knows what the ultimate number would have been. Who knows who wins and who loses in those sorts of matters, together with the inevitable appeals and appeals on appeals. That's the second option. The third option is that you negotiate in good faith and you come to a settlement and you close these matters out, and they are best and final and done. And then we can focus on building houses for regional Victorians, and the Commonwealth Games authorities can focus on finding a host city for 26. And indeed, hopefully running a successful games, and we wish them well. And again, genuinely grateful, despite the distress and the very real issues that they've had to confront. I'm very grateful that they have entered into these negotiations in a spirit of goodwill, and that we've got a final binding settlement to these matters. That's in everybody's interests. I'll now let the Treasurer make a few comments, and then we're happy to take a few questions.
Thanks, Premier, and I echo the Premier's observations. Firstly, acknowledging the hard work that's been done by our negotiators and, of course, the representatives of the Commonwealth Games various federations, some 3 of them involved in that negotiation process, and, of course, to the independent mediators who assisted the parties in being able to come to a conclusion. I think in good faith this has been addressed by the parties, and I think, quite frankly, this is the best outcome that could possibly be achieved for the purposes of moving on and dealing with the things that regional Victoria needs and deserves. So you can see from the costings of the original business case just how the costs have escalated from the original work that was done. And I do want to make the point that the world has changed quite considerably from the mid-February 2022 settlement or contract date. And a couple of points to bear in mind. Firstly, a couple of weeks later, Russia invaded Ukraine and we saw hyperinflation, largely around energy and commodity markets, affect the world. We've also seen, as China's opened up and the supply chain problems that they've encountered from COVID, again, greater feeding into inflation and a shortage of supply of vital building materials. Finally, of course, 12 interest rate rises that have had an impact upon, well, we know it's had an impact upon our building industry, and we've seen that manifest in the challenges that have confronted this industry and the work that the state has done to assist the industry and consumers through. So a lot has changed since the original contract. So those changes, of course, have been reflected in part in the nature of the costings that were available to government to make the decision to no longer proceed. Security costs, for example, policing costs have doubled to $492 million. The cost of installing, dismantling temporary infrastructure overlays, demountable seating, broadcast facilities, fencing and flooring at competition venues has almost doubled to $500 million. The cost of transporting officials and athletes to and from the games has almost tripled to $300. The July estimates for the cost of the village, the athletes' village, now more than 4 times the original costs. Now, that's partly due to the strict requirements that the Commonwealth Games Federation put around the nature of the locations that could be provided for athletes, and in no small part that there were limited locations, for example Ballarat, limited locations, limited land available. It also meant that some of those locations would have been suitable for permanent housing. So we would ultimately have to have reassembled or relocate that housing. The consequence of that was, of course, it wasn't particularly attractive to the private sector to partner with us. You'll also see from the costings of both the Department of Premier and Cabinet and the Department of Treasury and Finance, we've identified a range of additional costs in the order of $2 billion, which included that hyper-escalation that has been driven by shorter timeframes to deliver infrastructure on time for the Games. Broader inflation issues that relate to the supply chain, particularly in the regions, shortfalls that we've encountered in regional accommodation, again driving up costs, and the cost of displacing major sporting events during the Games period. So basically in delivering of projects, it comes down to cost, quality and time. Time could not be moved. The Commonwealth Games people were pretty clear that they needed the Games delivered strictly on time, not unreasonably. Of course, the quality of the Games very much stipulated by the Commonwealth Games Federation and very difficult to accommodate in a multi-location regional Games, and ultimately that meant price was the only pressure point that could be relieved. So in short, delivering the Games would have required a much greater investment than we were originally led to believe, and that was not going to be, quite frankly, a very good deal for the taxpayer. Our priorities has always been to deliver the things that regional Victorians rate most, and of course we will. As the Premier has made clear, we are able to not only deliver all of the infrastructure that we've identified that we would commit to as part of the legacy of the Games, all of that will be delivered together with the settlement. All of it effectively acquits the allocations that we put in the 22-23 budget, so no further impact upon the state's balance sheet at $2.6 billion. So with that $2.6 billion of investment, we think that regional Victorians will get the infrastructure, the housing and of course the investment in regional sport and community sporting facilities that they deserve, and they will get it. Thank you.